very last in our series of Green and Healthy School webinars. For those of you joining us for the first time, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And for those of you returning, welcome back. My name is Myla Kelly, and I will be your facilitator for today's call and for an upcoming workshop that I'll talk about in a couple minutes. I just want to, before we move on to our presenter for today, I just wanted to talk a little bit about who we are and kind of how we came to be doing this type of webinar series, which we hope to continue doing into the future. I am the coordinator of a program called Peaks to Prairies Pollution Prevention Center, which provides pollution prevention information for EPA Region 8 states. So those are the Dakotas and the Rocky Mountains. I have them listed up there on the top. Basically, what we do is distribute tools and information to businesses, industries, technical assistance providers, state, tribal government agencies, schools, all kinds of audiences for the purpose of aiding in the practice of pollution prevention. And when we talk about pollution prevention, we really just mean that we're working on environmental problems at the outset, so eliminating, reducing waste and pollutants rather than dealing with pollutants through treatment or disposal. So, you know, a lot of the practices, everything from energy conservation to taking chemicals out of cleaning products to improving or to reducing the use of pesticides, those are all examples of pollution prevention, particularly as they relate to school environments. So basically what I do is connect people who have questions with people who have answers. So the person that has answers today has great information on environmental grant writing. And so I just kind of think of myself as a conduit of information. So if you've got questions about anything, any of the topics that we've talked about in this series or any questions today, I can absolutely refer you. If I can't answer it myself, I can absolutely refer you to the right person. We are a program under Montana State University's Department of Extension, their Housing and Environmental Health program in Bozeman, Montana. And this webinar series consisted of 5 topics, and these are all archived if you look on the left side of the slide here at www.tribalp2.org. All of these sessions have been recorded, and the presentations are also available on that website. So we talked about indoor air issues, we talked about integrated pest management, green cleaning, toxic chemicals in your school. That included school chemical cleanouts, PCBs, lead, asbestos. We talked about reducing your footprint with regards to waste and energy conservation, and today we're talking about environmental justice grant application and management. So basically when you've learned about all these great things you want to implement in your schools, what are some options for getting some funding, what are some tips on how to write some grant applications. And we're wrapping this whole thing up with a one-day workshop, which is in Billings, Montana on June 16th. So if you know of anybody who might be interested, or if you yourselves are interested in getting more information on any of these topics, it will be held at the Bighorn Resort in Billings, Montana. And again, it's June 16th, and there are still a limited number of scholarships available. So if you're interested in going or you know anyone who might be, please let me know. Here's my contact information, myla.kelly@montana.edu, and my phone number's up there, 994-6948, area code 406. So with that, a couple of housekeeping notes. You are all muted, everyone who's in the audience, so we can't hear you, but we would really like to have some interaction with you, and the best way to do that is through questions. So anytime during the presentation, if you've got questions for Nancy or for me, you can type the question into your question pane, which you should see on your dashboard. And I will facilitate asking those questions to Nancy, whether we do it in the middle of the call or at the end of the call. We'll just see how it goes. But if you have, but as we're going along, any questions that come to you, please let me know. And our presentations will be posted at www.tribalp2.org. www.tribalp2.org. Okay, great. So with that, I am going to turn the presentation over to Nancy Reich. And Nancy Reich is an environmental protection specialist with EPA's Region 8, and that is in Denver, Colorado. Can you hear me, Nancy?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much, Mila.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Take it away. So I've now made you the presenter, so you can go ahead and show your screen. And
okay. So I just click here.
Are you going to do the poll question, right? Lila?
Yeah.
Yep, we will. Just a second.
So I just click on this closed window here. Oh, show my screen.
There, yep.
Inside the box.
Okay. Matt's given me some hints here. People, excuse me for a second. Okay. So, all right.
Great. And we'll go ahead and start off with those poll questions, Nancy, after you introduce your talk.
Okay. So I work in the Environmental Justice Program here at EPA, and basically the goal during this webinar is to help you understand how to get through the federal grant application process, give you some tips and insights, make it less intimidating, and offer my assistance as a project officer in EPA to answer any questions once this webinar is complete. So we have some poll questions here that hopefully you'll be able to answer. So the first one is, do all grant programs require cost sharing or a match? And your choices are yes or no. Okay. The next one is, let's see, a quality assurance project plan, otherwise known as a QAPP, is always required. Is that true or false? Okay. Next question. Equipment is any item with a cost of more than $1,000. Is that true or false? Okay. Next question. In the request for proposals, also known as an RFP, the applicant knows exactly what criteria the reviewer will use to score the application. Is that true or false? Okay. All right. And that takes care of our questions. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and begin the discussion here, if I can get this thing. Here we go. How to begin. Thank you very much for taking that poll. Okay, so how do you begin with your application? So you want to think about what type of a project are you going to pursue. Does your organization want to do research? Here are the places on the internet that you might want to look for requests for proposals or RFPs. Once you've located ones that might be of interest and fit your criteria, your next step is to make sure that you're eligible to apply. And if you're not eligible to apply, would you be able to partner with another organization who could apply and still be able to do the project? So if you've made the eligibility hurdle, you're ready to move on to the next phase. Okay, getting started. On this slide are some examples of ideas for projects. As you're reading these, here's what I want you to think about as your next steps. Look at your organization's big picture. Who are you? What are your priorities and your strengths? What projects have you worked on in the past and were successful in and made a meaningful difference in your community? What needs in your community are ones that your organization might be able to target now and ensure an environmental improvement in the end? Do you have projects that need, say, a part 2 or additional environmental work to bolster the work that's already been done? If so, then you want to start with the end in mind. Create a project or a plan, not just a proposal. Be honest and straightforward. So as you're reading those things, those are things that you want to think about. Okay, so what's next? Next, you want to really read that guidance, that RFP. You want to read it cover to cover. You want to know exactly what that guidance says. And I can't stress that enough. So you want to make sure that that's the main thing that you do. You want to understand that guidance and the goals of the agency that's issuing the guidance and their mission. So you want to follow the directions, and most of all, you need to complete all of the requirements listed in the guidance. This is how your application is going to be scored. So keep that in mind. So federal announcements have almost always these 8 items. They're fairly standard. And this is part of what I want to teach you throughout this seminar today. Funding opportunities give us the definition of the program and the background information. So in the small grant program, it's going to give a definition of environmental justice and what it means. It's also going to give detailed information about EPA's strategic plan and the linkage and the anticipated outputs and outcomes. And I'll talk about that more in detail in another slide. It's going to give the award information, which is the dollars available for award in the RFP and how long your project would be. So that would be like 1 year. And probably how many awards are expected to be made from the RFP. And again, your eligibility, which I talked about. And the cost sharing will also be listed in the RFP, otherwise known as the match. And not all grants require a match. Okay. Now this is an initial application package checklist. And you might want to keep this checklist for future reference, just to refer back to it from time to time. Oh, I also want to let you know that all of the notes in this slide presentation are available for you once the slide presentation is done, and I believe that these, Mila, if I'm correct, can be downloaded by the folks on the call. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yep,
Great.
they're all posted at the www.tribalp2.org.
Great. So as we go along, folks, you don't need to take a whole bunch of notes because everything that I say plus additional information is all going to be available to you. So here are the elements of a work plan, and I will go through these in some detail, and like I said, a lot of other information will also be in the notes. So there are 5 elements to a work plan. You've got the requests for proposals are almost always competitive. And so you've got to really make sure that you are carefully reading and paying attention to what's required. You, of course, have the standard form that's needed with a lot of information, and you must make sure that you submit the original application form and that it's signed by someone who's duly authorized by your board to sign that application. There's also something called a state contact person, and for those of you that are from tribal organizations, you're not required to have any kind of state contact person. For those within the other states within the region, Utah and Wyoming are the only states that have a single point of contact, and so there's information on how to find that on my notes for that as well. Okay, moving on to element 1 here. This is the one-page summary, and basically it's just that. It's a little synopsis of what basically your project proposal is all about. So basically you want this to be very concise. You want it to say the what you propose to do, how you're going to do it, when you're going to do it, who will benefit, and how you'll know you're successful. Element 2 of your work plan is the introduction, and basically it's the nature of your organization, how long you've been in existence. It gives information about whether you're a nonprofit or other organization, what success you've had in the past, the purpose of your project, detailed characteristics of your affected community or your target audience, and if you're an EJ community, give statistics about that community, and project completion plans, timeframes, and expected results. But again, it's pretty much your introduction. Okay, then we come to element 3. This is your detailed project description. So this is where you're going to get really into the details, the big meat of your project. Some grants limit the number of pages for your project work plan narrative. And the work plan narrative is one of the most important aspects of your application, and it will be the primary basis for your selection. So here you want to zero in on the specific problem. You want to use statistics to support existence of the problem, ensure that the situation can be improved or changed, connect the problem to your organization, and how your organization is best suited to tackle the issue, and what sets you apart as the best for this job. Demonstrates your knowledge of the problem and what the environmental improvement will be when the project is done. And don't make any assumptions of the reviewers, because they probably don't have intimate knowledge of your specific area, so make sure you give lots of details. I'll talk a little bit more about this in slides that follow. Excuse me, I just need to take a drink of water here. Okay, so problem solving. This is going to be, when I talked in the last slide about zeroing in on your problem, this is, you want to take some note on how you're going to go into a certain approach. So you want to come up with goals for your project here. You want to develop a timeline and on how you're going to accomplish this, the schedule that you want to come up with. So you want to list the major tasks that you will complete to meet the goals of the project. So you want to break these broad goals into smaller tasks and lay them out in a schedule over the 12-month period or whatever project period you're looking at. Determine and identify in the proposal the total estimated cost for each task. You may estimate this cost by the number of personnel, materials, or other resources you'll need to carry out the tasks. Make sure your methods are realistic, reasonable, and keep the bigger picture in mind when you're looking at the smaller tasks. Include a timetable of your major milestones and tasks or subtasks. And here are some examples of problem-solving examples. So basically, you have inadequate outreach to rural communities. So you would want to educate and empower rural residents about environmental issues and threats to human health. Or maybe you have a lack of coordination on issues. So in order to solve that, you would want to provide training to improve communication along environmental and other community groups. Or maybe you have inadequate long-term progress. So you would want to reinvigorate a past project which has stalled. So those are just some examples. Maybe as I'm talking, you can think of other examples that you have. Partnerships. So here we've got some folks shaking hands and, talking about partnerships, which are very critical to the success of a project. So you want to ask the question when you're talking to partners of what is the added value that this partner brings to your project. You want to articulate your strengths and weaknesses and compare them to your partner's strengths and weaknesses as they relate to your project. So bring partners in as early as possible and ask for their input as often as possible. In hard budget times, we all know that it's really important to bring other partners on board, and those partners also can help you come up with other resources as you go along. Partners should have strengths and play support and key roles and add value to your project. They should show a commitment and be in it for the long haul, just not for the length of your project. And your partner should be able to demonstrate success on other projects. Public participation. You want to make sure that the public is involved from the very start. This is really important in the EJ communities because they have felt disenfranchised for such a long time that they really want to be involved and they want to know what the benefits are going to be from a project. So oftentimes stakeholders have completely different perspectives on what's happening in a community. So if you have the public involved and you give them a chance to participate, you'll learn from them and they'll also have a chance to learn from you. So think about ways to get them involved, whether that's through meetings, workshops, youth activities. The sooner they get involved in the process, the more likely they are to support your project and the more likely you are to be able to address their needs. So really think about how you're not only going to get them involved, but how will you be able to get their input and be able to evaluate what's happened and how you will be able to sustain your project in the long run. And also how you'll be able to get continue activities and lessons learned after the funding ends. Okay, potential impacts. Don't you like my little guy up here with the factory in the background, and he's got tears, and this is where you want to think about your results piece. Basically, you want to make sure and check your guidance about this. This is a good place to consider how you plan to evaluate your process. This is often the most poorly written piece of the grant, but it's also the most important. If you're having problems here developing your evaluation process, you should take a step back and look at your objectives. So basically here, what you're trying to do is figure out how you're going to address specific community environmental concerns, or how you're going to involve your community stakeholders, or identify and address potential impacts and benefits, or how you're going to evaluate actual impacts of your project. So these basically are your outputs, not your outcomes. From your outputs, you're going to see your outcomes. So this is when you're ready to begin your evaluation process. Most of all, the tasks in your project should have a direct bearing on how your project will be evaluated and called a success. So here are some potential impact examples. So you could, out of a project, you could have a best practices manual. And this would be something that could help reduce air toxics. So fleets would basically be able to come up with, or I shouldn't say come up with, would buy into the fact that they could do a better job of using alternate fuels, or basically rerouting their fleets through other areas rather than through a community. And some of these other projects, if you wanted to talk to me about them, I could give you ways that these have made impacts. So if you want to talk to me about any of those, please give me a call. Let's see. Element 4 here. These are environmental results. Let's see. Here you discuss how you'll evaluate the measures of success of your project. So you want to include anticipated benefits and challenges in implementing the project. So you must state anticipated accomplishments along with a set of performance measures of how you'll determine overall success of your project at meeting these accomplishments. So there are a number of different ways that can be done. And so, you know, as the slide says, you want to really make sure that you specify what will be different once your project is done. And there are some other examples written on that, on those notes that you can take a look at. Okay, element 4. And you like those little pieces of the puzzle here? I'm just giving you ideas on how to fit this all together. I hope that you get a little bit of funny out of this. I know this is so dry. I hope you guys are all still awake out there.
You want to ask a question?
You guys have any questions out there? Mila, are there any questions up there?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Who determines the length of the grant award period?
The grant award period is put in the RFP. So that's always determined when the RFP goes out. And if it's a one-year project period, it can, well, any grant can be extended up to a year. And that is determined depending on if you're having trouble with certain time frames, or if there's some kind of extenuating circumstance that keeps you from completing your project, then you can ask for an extension. It doesn't give you any more money, but it does allow you to go ahead and extend your project if you need to complete activities.
Great, and I have one more for now. Do the same rules apply to tribal applications as for others?
Yes. There's no difference in nonprofits, academics. Yes, all the rules apply across the board for competitive grants. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. I understand there's some problem with background noise.
I don't hear it right now.
Okay,
so,
Matt's covering some of these vents behind me, so I hope that's helping.
Yeah, it sounds better now.
Okay, great. Yeah. All right. Let's see. So here we have environmental results. So these are actually you're evaluating the measure of the success of your project. So these include the anticipated benefits and challenges in implementing your project. So you must state anticipated accomplishments along with a set of performance measures for how you'll determine overall success of your project meeting these accomplishments. So your outcomes will be short-term, which would be like an increase in knowledge, interim, which would be a decrease in the environmental or health problem, or long-term, which would be there's no longer an environmental health problem. That would be like utopia. So it's always good to have a baseline measurement to show that you have made an improvement from where you started at the beginning of the project. It's not required, but it's really a good idea to have a baseline if you can. So keep in mind that outputs and outcomes are either qualitative, which are subjective, or quantitative, which are objective. Either one or both is acceptable in your work plan and your final report. Element 5 of your work plan. In some grants, letters of participation, commitment, and support or support are sufficient. In others, you're required to put together a memorandum of understanding in a formal document. So just be sure that you check your RFP to see which of those are required. Just make sure that whatever is required, that it comes along with your application. Don't have those sent separately to EPA or whoever the funding organization is. Okay, quality assurance project plans. These are for data collection. If you're going to do any kind of data collection, you are going to be required to put together a quality assurance project plan. These are only required if you do primary data collection or secondary data collection. And these can be a little bit difficult to do. So just know that if you're required to do one, it's going to be a while to complete one. So make sure that you build that into your time frame if you think you're going to have to do one. Let's see, what else do I need to say about that? If you have any questions on that, there's a lot of information on this slide, so make sure you check that. EPA does have to approve that before you can do any data collection. Okay, thank you. All right, whether it's a grant or a cooperative agreement, before the RFP goes out, EPA or the funding agency decides whether it will be a grant or a cooperative agreement. A grant, basically, you're awarded the money, and EPA pretty much has a hands-off on the project. You're required to do reporting, and you check in with your project officer, but we don't have very much involvement. In a cooperative agreement, EPA has a very, pretty much a partnership with the grantee, and we provide a lot of expertise in assistance in the project, and we just have a lot more involvement in a project. So that's the difference in a grant or a cooperative agreement. DUNS number. All organizations must have a DUNS number to apply for a grant. And it's very easy to get. There's no cost, and all the information for a DUNS number is on this slide. Budget categories. There's a lot of information on this slide in the notes about budget categories. Just keep in mind that there's your personnel costs are basically for staff. Fringe benefits vary from organization to organization. Just make sure that you follow your own organization's policies on that. Equipment is basically any property that costs more than $5,000 per item, and we discourage the purchase of equipment because basically once the end of the project comes to an end, EPA owns that piece of equipment, and we have to figure out how to dispose of that piece of equipment. So it's discouraged. We would rather have you rent a piece of equipment than to basically buy it. Contractual, there's a lot of information about contractual. You need to follow your own procurement guidelines for doing any kind of contractual information. And indirect cost rates are negotiated ahead of time. So if you don't have an indirect cost rate, most of those costs go under other. And here is an example of a detailed budget, but we really like a lot of information in a detailed budget, and we also want your budget discussed in the narrative itself so that we really know what and how your money will be spent. and how it fits into the whole picture of your grant award or your grant application. So please make sure that you do a really good job on that piece. And we also want to know that your project is going to be successful from the way that your grant dollars are allocated towards your project tasks. So it's an important piece, so don't neglect it. Costs allowed. Basically, this slide talks about what's reasonable. Would a prudent person have made the decision to incur the cost of the goods or services? And there's a little more information on that piece. Allocable, and I know these words are really weird. You can tell these are attorney words. And no, I hope there aren't any attorneys on the line. If the goods or services involved are chargeable or assignable to the cost objective and with relative benefits received, then it's allocable. If it's allowable, it means it follows the circular law and terms and conditions and regulations. So, and then there's another piece in here, and this is where I refer to the food. Under certain specific standards, we do allow paying for food with grant funds, and you must include participant support costs in your budget and an explanation for the costs in your narrative if you're going to include food in your budget. So basically, you really do have to pay attention to food costs, and they just have to be very, very reasonable, and they are for meeting specific, and they have to be very minor. So keep that in mind when you're going to put food in your budget. Okay, subgrants and contractor. Basically, a subgrant is money that is passed through to a partner organization. And so it would be another non-profit organization that is going to partner with you to do work. A contractor would be someone that you're going to use who would compete for funds. So that would be you would put dollars in your contractual budget category there. So those are explained more so in the slide notes. Okay, funding restrictions. You guys knew I was going to get to this part. Basically, this little fellow spins around here. I think, oh, don't you like that thumb spinning around? All right, little levity there. You guys laughing at all? I'm sure if I could hear you would be. Okay, so, you know, we can't fund any parties, no vacations, no big barbecues. Bummer, huh? So we can't do matching for other grant funds, construction, furniture, lobbying. You know, we're going to be really, really boring. This is just a very short list of some of the things. It's not very inclusive at all, but if you guys go out on the web, you can take a look at a whole list of things that can't be funded with grant funds. Okay, oh, look at this guy with the weights there. All right, common strengths. You want to really pay attention to a bunch of the stuff that I've already mentioned, and I've got a whole list of things here on, you really want to be concise. You want to make sure that you've read that RFP. You want to do a good job of covering all of the things in the RFP. You want to describe what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and really pay attention to all of the details that you're talking about, and do a good job with what your targets are, what your budget is, what your work plan is saying, and just think about what you're writing and have a lot of input from other people. I know you guys can do it. We've seen some really good writing, and I know you guys can do a great job. We want some really good applications coming in. Common weaknesses. And these things are just oversight mostly. You left out something critical. You just didn't give us enough information somewhere. You'd be amazed at how many people that aren't eligible apply anyway. So just really look at, does your program or your project fit the grant program that you're applying for? Avoid words like might, if, could, should, would. Be really positive when you're writing. Just really focus. If you're going to mail in through FedEx your binder, or I mean your application, don't put it in a binder or in plastic or anything like that, because it's really difficult for us to copy it or to scan it so that we can get it to reviewers. Okay. All right. Here's the last minute. Boy, I'm running out of time here, Matt. It's fine? Okay. This is the did you. This is your quality control piece. It's not too late to have someone who's totally out of the loop to read your project, give you some feedback. If that person has trouble understanding your project, then so will the reviewers. So you want to stay within the format of the RFP. You want to make sure it's easy for the reviewer to read and therefore understand and score your work plan. This is your last chance to find errors. So you want to develop the checklist that you read. You want to make sure that you followed the guidelines. And remember, the deadline is firm. If you miss that deadline, that's it. So just keep that in mind. Okay. All right. Grant management. Congratulations. You got it. All right. So this is, for nonprofits, this is mandatory training. There's online required. 2 people from your organization must take this training. It's very easy, very straightforward. Okay, so grant award. I'm going to speed through this pretty quick. Basically, once you receive the award, you're going to get you're going to get an official award. And once you sign that, that's a binding agreement between you and the federal government. You want to make sure you read that document. There are terms and conditions in that, and they're all important. You need to make sure you understand it. You're going to have a project officer assigned. There you are, sitting over coffee, hopefully. If not, it's probably done long distance, but still, you want to make sure that you're in touch with your project manager as often as possible to make sure that everything is going really well. If you have any problems, any concerns, any kinds of issues that come up, you want to talk with your project officer and work those through. There's always an option for modifying your work plan. So just make sure that you keep an open communication. It's very, very important. Again, here we have more about schedules, outcomes, but basically the key is communication. And then there will be reporting requirements. Those are all going to be listed in the terms and conditions of your grant agreement. And this is a very complicated slide, but it just gives you the whole grant award process from start to finish. So I won't spend any time on that, but it just gives you an idea of where everything goes. And here are some grant resources that you guys might find helpful. And those, again, are some others, some places to go that you might find other grants that are available. Same with this one. All right, I am done. I want to thank you very much for listening to me. And if there are any questions.
Nancy, great. Thank you for all that amazing amount of information. Just one question, or actually a couple questions. You know, on average, is it possible to say how many applications you generally receive for an RFP and sort of what the average rate of percent success is?
Well, I can tell you that this year on the EJ Small Grants for Region 8, we received 9 applications, and we are funding 4 of those. So that's a pretty good rate.
Mm-hmm. Great. And could you remind us again what the most common avenues are for getting those grants out, the availability of those grants out to, you know, different audiences? You know, how do you advertise those?
We well, on our website, which is basically epa.gov/Region 8.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we, and then under environmental justice, after that, I mean, you're going to see the environmental justice is listed there on Region 8. We have our grants right there, and that includes environmental justice as well as community action for renewed environment grants are there as well. And those are a bit more difficult because they compete on a national level. Mm-hmm. But the EJ Small Grants compete on the regional level. And those have been in existence since 1994. So, and those just closed for this year, but we hope that we will have those coming out again next year. But, you know, we can't ever say for sure given the federal budget the way it is, but we certainly hope so. But I would be glad to, you know, answer any questions. My phone number, if anybody would like to give me a call, is 303-312-6040.
Nancy, how much money is it when you send out those EJ grants? How much money is generally available each year?
For the past 2 or 3 years, for the region, we've had 100,000, and each of those grants have been for 25,000 each.
Oh, okay.
So they're small grants, but you'd be amazed at the projects that have been done with those small amounts of money. It's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And those are for nonprofits and for tribal organizations and tribal nonprofits. So they're not available, no states, local governments, or academia. They cannot apply.
Right.
But those folks can partner with nonprofits or tribal folks.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Nancy. We're just going to wrap up to see what our learning curve was on from your presentation. We're going to wrap up with our poll questions, and again, we will we'll also post that link that Nancy mentioned to the environmental justice grants, and we will we'll post those on our site as well, the tribalp2.org. Under just click on the icon for environmental justice application. A grant application and management, and we'll put that link there as well, along with Nancy's contact information. So thank you very much, and here's the follow-up questions.
All right, so the first one, do all grant programs require a cost sharing or match? No, they don't. Huh? Oh, I was supposed to do that. All right. Awesome. You guys all got that right. Cool. All right. Quality assurance project plan is always required. So now I'm supposed to wait for that to come up. Oh, true or false? And that one is false. Those are only required if you're going to do data collection. Equipment is any item with a cost of more than $1,000. True or false? The answer to that is true. In the RFP, the applicant knows exactly what criteria the reviewer would use to score the application. True or false? That's exactly right. Okay, great.
Well, that's a wrap. Thanks so much, Nancy, and all of our attendees today, and I hope you enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you, Mila.